Well, good morning to you this morning and welcome to Forest Heights Baptist Church. We're so glad you're here this morning at 804 Tangier Drive, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And we're here on Palm Sunday. We're studying from 1 Corinthians and we're down in chapter 15 as we work our way through this letter from Paul to the church at Corinth. We're at verse 35 this morning. So 1 Corinthians 15:35. I'm reading from the NIV. I think you'll be able to follow along this morning, if you will. Verse 35 then. But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? How foolish! What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or of something else. But God gives it a body as He has determined, and to each kind of seed He gives its own body. Not all flesh is the same. People have one kind of flesh, animals have another, birds another, and fish another. There are also heavenly bodies and there are earthly bodies. But the splendor of the heavenly body is one kind, and the splendor of the earthly body is another. The sun has one kind of splendor, and the moon another, and the stars another, and the stars differ from star in splendor. And so will it be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable. It is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that, the spiritual. The first man was of dust of the earth, and the second man is of heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the image of the earthly man, so shall we bear the image of the heavenly man. So Paul is writing to the church at Corinth, as we've said, and we've been working our way through that. The church at Corinth has some problems, and Paul's answering those problems and giving them direction and things like that. And so we're down to this part. Now, Paul has already been talking about this idea of resurrection because some of the people didn't believe it. They didn't believe you were resurrected. They had different ideas about it than they came from the pagan culture, we said. But Paul continues with his description of this idea of the resurrection and how it works, this fact that God raises us from the dead. And one of the things he points out here in this passage that we read, that I just want to kind of look at quickly, is in verse 47, he said the first man was of the dust of the earth, and the second man is of heaven. So I want to look at that for just a minute. I want you to realize just exactly what Paul was talking about there. And where did he get that? Well, in Genesis 3:19, it says, by the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. And this is said in Genesis 3, which means it was after the fall. And this was God's word to Adam and to all his kind, that they came from dust and they returned to dust. I want to think about that for just a minute as a way to kind of introduce this. So what the Bible says is, we are what we sweep, right? You're dust. Dust really is not something we notice, and maybe some of you notice it more than others, but it's all around us all the time. And if you work around construction especially, or anywhere like that where you don't have maybe a dirt road or something, you see a lot more dust. You mostly will see it. You'll notice it. Most of the time, our interaction with dust, probably for the most people, is that when we're swiffering or sweeping or dusting, as my aunt used to call it, away, getting rid of this idea of it. This part right here probably is a little more than you had really want to think about, but let me point out something to you. All that dust that you're swiffering and sweeping, all that stuff that you've been trying to get rid of, you've been inhaling that cocktail of hair and pollen and fiber and mess and mites and skin cells. We don't really think about that, right? But dust is the result of decay. Dust is the breaking down of things, decay. It comes from the decomposition, in other words. That's the idea of breaking things down. Could be animal, could be vegetable, could be mineral. Dust in our homes means that we have cells that died recently. I don't know if you know, some of us, our cells are dying faster than others, but anyway, you know what I mean. If you look at the movies and the other pictures, ghost towns always look dusty in the movies, right? Because, well, the idea is there's nobody there, the town is dead. This post-apocalyptic stuff that you see, I thought that was easier to say than it was. Movies that we talk about, it's always dust around, everything like that. And the idea is they're picturing this loss of people and creatures and also of material, of the more structures and stuff begin to fall down, they begin to dust, they turn into dust. And God says we're made out of that. And that's kind of an interesting thing. And it's not really an encouraging thing when you think about that, but that one day all of our cells, all of us, will be swirling around in leaves and wedged between sofa cushions and hidden behind radiators and stuck on the ground and caught on windowsills and various things like that. But that's really what happens. And it doesn't really matter if you're rich and powerful or you're just a regular person or maybe you're poor and impoverished. We're all going to dust. That's what the Bible says. It says we'll return to dust. So this is kind of a sad theme, right? Paul says, look, to the people at Corinth, he says, if that's what you believe, that you're dust, you're right. But guess what? There's something after that you can be raised. He said in verse 35, how are the dead raised? So now he's gotten past this idea that they are raised. And now he wants to know how they going to, now Paul knows, he's asking this question that he's been asked. How, Paul, do the dead get raised? Naturally, everybody, if you're going to say, well, the dead are raised and there is such thing as resurrection, then the next question is, well, what do we look like? I get that a lot. What do you think we're going to be? And how's all that going to work and all that stuff? And of course, Paul asked the second question, which was asked of him, well, what kind of body do they come with? Everybody wants to know what we're going to look like, right? And Paul goes into this detailed thing here of talking about it. The first thing I want you to get a hold of is, though, this idea here in verse 36. He says that's foolish. Now, what's foolish? That they ask these questions? No. It's not really foolish that they ask, the question, how are they raised or what are they going to look like? What's foolish is, he says, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. So what Paul's saying there is, and he's going to go into details or give us some more illustrations, but he says basically that dust precedes life. That life comes from that which is not alive. That which is alive doesn't need life. That which is dead needs life. So silly as that sounds, maybe as simplistic as it sounds, there has to be a death before there can be a resurrection to life. Now Paul is making a couple of points here that I want to point out is, if people, and some of the people at Corinth, and some of the people today, and they and some people have even come to some Christian groups or call themselves Christians, say that it's not really necessary that Jesus actually died. And I think Paul has in mind that some people there at Corinth would have said, well, maybe he didn't really die. Maybe he was something else, or he really wasn't human in that sense, and so he didn't really die. He didn't really have to die. So if he was, he just, he was there, and then he wasn't there, and now he was back. But that doesn't really, maybe he didn't really die. Because they still can't get their head around how you can die and come back to life. Because that's really what's at the bottom of that. If you can't get your head around that, if you can't accept the fact that dead dust can turn into life, then you're going to have a problem. So then you have to solve it by coming up with some solution that doesn't involve death. That's where you get a lot of people that, a lot of belief systems have come to the conclusion that we really don't need a dead Jesus. We just need that really good Jesus, that really nice guy who had high moral standards, who could do some cool stuff and everything, and we just need to follow his. And that's what the world says when it thinks that we're going to all good people and Jesus was a good guy and we all need to be like him, right? And I know that I say that, and you may not be catching that. But the next time you listen to something, listen to these people who talk about these things and point out this stuff when it talks about that. That they just kind of got this idea that everybody's going to be okay and all you got to do is be good. Because they really don't want to deal with the dead Jesus and what that means and what that has to say. But in any case, where did Paul or where would these people have dealt with some of this stuff at? Well, I think it would be, if we could go back briefly, and I'll call your attention to it, you might have remembered this in the Old Testament, the Valley of the Dry Bones. Ezekiel the prophet was given some visions and given some tasks to do, and he was supposed to do these things. And one of the things he was given was this vision of a valley of dry bones. In Ezekiel chapter 37, it goes into great details, but let me, if I can get that to pull up there, that it talks about Ezekiel. God shows Ezekiel a valley of dry bones. They're just scattered out. It's a huge, and so he's looking out over a vast expanse, and all there is bones. And bones are the things that's going to be before they turns into dust. And so the idea, he says, speak to these and call them back to life. And Ezekiel says, I can't do that, Lord, only you can do that. And so it was acknowledgement by Ezekiel that God was the only one who could do that. And that it also showed that he understood that there was, if there's going to be any life to this dead bones, that only God could do it. And the question is, will God do it? And should God do it? And can God do it? Well, God did it. And God tells Ezekiel, you go ahead. I'm giving you that. I'll make that available to you through me, through you. And so Ezekiel speaks to them and they begin to come together and they become a living, breathing. And he tells them even then to speak the breath into them, cause the breath to come alive. So the idea of death, and only God can do it, comes from way back in the scriptures, and God holds that right. And so what Paul is saying to them, he says, look, you all, if you don't die, you can't live. And you have to you have to die. It has to die to have life, because if it's already alive, it doesn't need life. Now, that's not just biological, it's also spiritual. But the good news is, maybe, that if you understand, the fact is that God sees every human being as dead until he brings them back because of their trusting in Jesus. Salvation, we call that. In other words, all are lost and dead. So even people who are alive can be dead in one sense. That's spiritually dead. They're disconnected from God in that. And so therefore he brings them back to life through Christ. And also there are dead people, biologically dead. And if they're going to come back to life, it has to be God that does it. So Paul goes on and talks about it. And he illustrates, because this would have been popular and easy to understand, that he's done. The Bible says that only God can do that. John, I think 11:25, Jesus said to her, that was to Mary, he says, I am the life and the resurrection and the life, and one who believes in me will live even though they die. Jesus himself claims that only people that he says who believes in him can live, that he is the resurrection. He even talks about it before he's resurrected. And he says that if there is a resurrection, it's me, I'm it, and that I'm the one who gives life. And if you die, I can give you life again, if you believe in me. So once again, there are conditions. I know people don't like to think about it that way, but it belongs to God. That's what Paul's saying. It's God's business. And he says, but God can do it and God will do it. That's what Paul's trying to tell them. And they're still stuck with it, like so many people today. They're hung up on the idea of if you can't explain me the how, you can't explain me all the details, then I can't necessarily believe it. Paul's given them some illustrations. He goes through these next verses. He talks about in verse 37 about sowing. He said, you don't take the plant and put it in the ground. You put the seed in the ground. I think they would have gotten that. I think most of you can get your head around that idea. So we're not having starter plants in the ground to do this. We're starting with seeds, because all those starter plants started from seeds. So I know you can go down the store and you can buy a flower that's already started, right? But that got started from a seed. So he's telling them, he said what they would have known is there would have to be seeds. And so these seeds go in the ground. When you put a seed in the ground, you end up with whatever that seed is. That seed goes through a process, dying in a sense, and becomes the plant. And you can see how large they are compared to the size of the seed. Now Paul goes on to say, in there he says, God gives it a body, which is determined by what the seed is. That God determined that too. He decided all that stuff. He gives that thing. So what is the gist of this? Well, first there has to be death. There has to be dust. Then there's life. Because before there was any human beings, there was dust. The Bible says he took dust and made us, grasped in the ground and made it out of dust. And therefore, then there become a human being, a human body really, and then God breathed life into it. So it's a kind of a two-step process there. God illustrated in Genesis. So that's Paul's argument here. And then he goes on to say everything is different. Everything that is different in death is going to be different in life. In other words, there's a different body here. There's a different body later. It's similar, but it's different in a different sense. He's going on. We are going to be uniquely human. We are always going to be human. We will always be human. We will not grow. By the way, that's what Paul's talking about here. You're not going to come back as a cat or a rat or a tick or a flea or a fly or an alligator or anything else. You're not going to come back as a rock, a goat, a wolf, a cloud, something with wings flying through the sky or anything like that. Okay, you will always be a human being. Only more. Only more. You'll be more. If you keep going through these verses down through 37, I won't read them all again to you. But what he's pointing out here is everything that is resurrected or comes back will come back in its same thing, same what it is. It will be different, but it'll be the same. That's how's that can be? Well, sure. You're dying in this body that we have now, but you'll be back. You'll be recognizable. But you'll be more powerful in one sense, right? How did he get that idea? Well, remember when Jesus appeared in the upper room in Luke chapter 24, down in verse 36 and so on, Jesus appeared in the upper room. Remember, they were sitting there behind locked doors. The Bible says locked doors. And all of a sudden, Jesus popped into the room. Did he have a key? No. That wouldn't have been the point. The point of the story is, and the idea is, he just showed up. How'd he get in? I'm sure there were people sitting around there going, how'd he get in? How'd he get in? How'd he get in? Right? Because he wasn't in. The door was locked. He didn't unlock the door. He didn't come in through the door. He came in. So Jesus appeared, and they knew he was Jesus. So he had to look like whatever they saw him, how he looked. He looked enough like himself for them to recognize him. But he was able to pass through the physical barrier of the walls and the door. So there has to be something about us different, yet the same. We would look the same, we'll be the same person, we'd be recognizable. However, we'll have power that we don't have, the ability to be in another dimension, in another way than we are now. What else would there be different if we're the same and there's nothing different? Then what's the point, right? We come back in a different way. Verse 42 says we'll be everlasting. Verse 42 says imperishable. In other words, there will be no more perishing after the first perish. Okay. In other words, after the first time, when you're dead in yourself, let's take it this way. Two things here. When you're dead spiritually and you're raised back spiritually to life through the trusting in Jesus, then you will never be dead spiritually again. Second thing, when you're dead physically and you're raised to new life by Jesus, you'll never be dead again. Okay? You'll never be back there. So Baptists hold the idea that you're saved, you're saved. So if you're saved, you're saved. You're not going to be dead again. You're not going to keep going back and forth, back and forth. So you're either saved or you're not saved. And who knows that? Not the preacher. Not your cousin, not your mama, not your daddy, but guess what? Jesus knows it, God knows it, and you know it. I never allow myself, and I don't let people convince me that somehow they don't know. Because if they don't know, then they must not be saved. Because the Bible says you will know. All right? And God knows. The rest of us, well, we just have to live with that. I'm satisfied to know about myself. I can't deal with everybody else. Sorry. But you should know. I think the Bible says that. So, you're going to be saved. You have everlasting life. So that's good. Everlasting. Right? Everlasting. You won't ever perish again. He says the perishable is raised up imperishable. Verse 43 says, and doesn't use this word, but radiant. If you look at 40, it says we're sown in dishonor, raised in glory. Sown in weakness, raised in power. What does that mean? Well, I guess it could mean some different things, but the point I see, the vision I have of it, is the radiance, the idea. What does that mean? Because of Jesus, remember Jesus, and you say, well, wait a minute, Robbie, Jesus is a unique situation. Okay, let's just hold on to that for a second. But there was some other people that were raised that were not unique. In other words, not Jesus. Jesus was raised, and we see in the Bible in 3 places, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, about the Mount of Transfiguration. On the Mount of Transfiguration, the disciples, 3 of them, saw, Jesus' inner circle, saw Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. Jesus is God and the God-man. Moses and Elijah were just men. And they had been dead a long time. And they saw them and they glowed. That's one of the words they used. They had this radiance about them, this difference. They recognized them. They somehow knew who they were. The apostles had definitely seen Jesus. I don't know if they'd seen Moses or Elijah. I'm sure they hadn't. But it was made known to them who they were. Right? Just like if you've got a picture at home of some cousin you've never seen before, then you've never seen him in person, but somebody tells you that's your cousin, then you look at the picture and go, okay, that's my cousin. Well, so God told them this is who it is. And there they were. They're radiant. So we will have some sense about us that's different. We will look the same. But we're spiritually alive and we're physically alive, everlasting life. That's what he says here. He says we're going to be raised imperishable, and we'll be in glory and power. We have the power. What the power? Well, Jesus can walk through walls. If we need to walk through a wall, we can. I think the power comes from the fact that, in one sense, we'll be in a different place, a different dimension than we're in now, a dimension that you can't cross over into. You can't go there unless God takes you there, right? That's how he keeps out who he don't want, who he keeps in, who he does want, right? So we have this power that we didn't have. And verse 43 talks about that power. Look at what we said about Jesus walking through locked doors, John 20 and 19. He's walking through locked doors. In Luke, it talks about Jesus eating food. Now, I don't think we're going to need to eat any food necessarily, but Jesus ate it because he wanted them to believe that he was Jesus and he still had a body and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how all that's going to work, and I don't think anybody else does that's not already there. But the fact is, Paul says we're going to be different. We're going to be raised. We're going to be raised to life, and there's going to be death before that, and then we're going to be raised, and we're going to be raised to life, and that we're going to be different than we are now, just like other things that he was pointing to are different in one sense. But whatever difference it is, it will not change. It will not go away. It will not alter. It will be what it is, and it'll be that way everlastingly. He goes on to say that there is this natural and spiritual body. I think he's pointing out that this difference, that we have this natural man now, and we have a spiritual man. I know there's 2 dimensions to that. There's a biological, there's physiological, and then there's a spiritual dimension. But the fact is that only way you're going to get to heaven and get this life that he's talking about is when the spirituals change, then the physical goes with it, right? You go there together. That you're going to have you're a different person spiritually. You will be a different person physically in one sense, but not that you'll look different or be somebody else, right? And then I think he goes on to say, if you will, that down in verse 46, if you will, he talks about spiritual did not come first, but the natural. We went back to Genesis. I'll leave you to go back there and look. But God created man out of the dust of the earth, right? And then he breathed life into him. So that's the idea that he's talking about here, this concept. He's also talking about Jesus, who the Bible says was who he was before the foundation of the world, and that Adam came along after the foundation of the world, and he sinned. He's the natural man. And Jesus is the spiritual man, and that's in that sense. And also that we will be, taken from sin into life. I think those are all going on. Verse 47 brings out this. First there was the man of dust. That's Adam. That's us. The second man is man of heaven. That was Jesus, who came to us from heaven. Right? That's what the Bible's teaching. Adam didn't come to us from heaven. Adam came to us from the ground. God made him, and he always lived here while he lived. And Jesus came from heaven. That's what the Bible talks about. That's what the Bible teaches. And what happens is there's this idea that this transformation that takes place. And what's going on is that we were dust because we died, we deteriorated into dust in a sense. God brings us back to life. In other words, no matter how long somebody's been dead or what state of affairs their molecules and atoms are, they're dust. If you're the microscopic, beyond seeing dust, and God will put that together. And we in heaven are in heaven. We have an image. We have this likeness. We have this power that we didn't have. The things that we were supposed to know that we lost because of our sin, that were hidden from us because of our sin, those things will be known to us. The things that we were supposed to be able to do, we will be able to do. Things, what is that? Well, we will have the dominion that the Bible talks about, the oversight of all of the things. The Bible talks about heaven and all that's going on there. We'll have that oversight. We'll have that ability. We'll have that understanding that we lost, right, through sin. And then we'll be, I think, in this last sense, he's talking about perfect image bearers. Remember, God gave us the image, his image. We are image bearers of God. But because of sin, we become flawed. Our image the image of God that's in us, that's showing, is flawed because of our sin. And so when we come to Jesus, he restores us. That's what Paul talks about, old man, new man. He brings us into a new situation and we become image bearers again. However, we are imperfect in that we don't have the fullness. That's where we're achieving a fullness. We're brought into completeness in heaven. That's where we have the complete picture. That's where we live in that Eden paradise, if you will. And we're changed. We're changed all together. All of it, the whole 9 yards, becomes a package, a changed package. Paul, writing church at Philippi, he says to those people there, he says, our citizenship is in heaven. We eagerly await the Savior from there, Philippians 3:20. We eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. So once again, the traits that are Jesus displayed in his human body as he was raised from the dead, including that, and after that, we will somehow have that. You're going to have to wait to see Jesus. I tell people all the time, well, how's this going to be, and how's that going to be, and what's that going to be, and what's this going to be? I said, well, the best way to do that is ask the guy that did it. How am I going to do that? Well, set yourself up to meet him one day on his home turf, and he'll be able to show you all that stuff, right? I mean, people, we all have excuses. I think a lot of times people's lack of being willing to accept certain things that are not explained in the way we would like them to be explained in the detail is just an excuse, just a reason to deny something. I say that if think about it this way, if everybody who absolutely wanted to be explained in infinite detail, everything that is necessary and needed to fly an airplane were the only people who ever rode on airplanes, nobody would go, or very few people would go. One, they wouldn't want to spend the time it takes to learn all that stuff. Two, they wouldn't agree with all of it. They think something was wrong. They still wouldn't believe it, and they would never get on an airplane. And then therefore, only the people who are willing to accept some of these things and then see them actually played out to their own satisfaction by getting on the airplane and flying will ever believe it. This is what the problem is, people. People don't believe a lot of things that the Bible says because they don't want to spend any time and energy looking into the Bible. Everybody, people got opinions about what the Bible says, but most people don't have any idea where it says it, or does it say it, or is it something they thought, and how come it says it, and why does it make sense according to the Bible. And they can't accept the fact that there are just going to be some things that God is going to show us down the road in the by and by. Otherwise, there'd be no need for trust or faith, or whatever word you like to use there. The Bible uses both, but faith. If there's no faith, there's no salvation. And so therefore they never get saved because they don't ever have any faith. And they don't believe anything the Bible says, or they don't believe there's anything bigger than themselves, and therefore they don't have any faith. They can't accept the faith that God knows that we're all sinners, and the only way to get saved is go to His Son Jesus. Then they have no faith and they're not saved. I don't care how many churches they go to, how many times they've been baptized, how much money they've given, or what all they think about something. If they haven't got enough faith to believe that what God has said in His Word about their sinfulness, boom. We're going to be image bearers. We'll have a perfect body. Don't ask me what that looks like exactly. It's going to look like you, but it's going to be perfect. Now, some of us may have dreams of having full heads of hair. I don't think that's going to be really required or necessary. But it might be. I don't know. I think we're going to look like we look like, because Jesus looked like He looked like. If He was a baby, they wouldn't have recognized Him, but they seen Him full grown. They knew what He looked like. To me, babies all look kind of sort of the same. I mean, I know they're different. And I don't want to insult any moms or nothing, but they got to get some space. They got some time on them before they start looking like anybody. But I know that it's a thing. I get in trouble for it all the time when people walk up and look at babies, and here's this baby's 2 weeks old, and maybe the eye color, or maybe the skin color, or something like that. Beyond that, it looks like cousin so-and-so. I said, who's cousin so-so died 100 years ago. Well, how do you know what they look like when they were a baby? Well, I don't, but I know how they look like an adult. I said, you seen a baby looks like an adult, let me know. I'd like to see one, right? Bless their heart. Amen. John writes in 1 John 3:2, dear friends, now we are children of God. He's talking about the people who are trusting Jesus, who are saved. Okay, he's not talking about the world. He's not talking about everybody. He's not talking about little kids per se. He's talking about people who have trusted Jesus. When he says children of God, he means the people who trusted God as their Savior. And what will we be has not yet been made known. Now, if you don't believe that, what doesn't mean that we don't have these pictures of Jesus and we don't know what that is, but we don't fully understand it, because I'm sure John was getting the same questions that have been asked right on up until now. He said, we don't know what we have. Let me read it again. We will be has not yet been made known. But we know this, that Christ, when He appears, shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. In other words, when we see Jesus in the spiritual flesh, so to speak, in that sense, as He's seated at the right hand of the Father, when we meet Jesus, we'll know who He is, and we'll see who we are. We'll know who we are. We'll recognize, we'll understand, we'll see it. I don't know, the song is so true, we'll know better by and by, right? Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 2, we've already studied that. He says, however it is written, what no eye has seen and no ear has heard and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love Him. In other words, what's heaven look like? All we got is what the Bible describes. And that doesn't suit everybody. It doesn't give us all the answers. It doesn't explain all of it in infinite details the way we'd like to explain, but it's going to be something great because God caught it up, and as soon as we think we've conceived of it, we're wrong. So, I know that might not be all that everybody thinks, everybody likes to look at, but guess what? That's what Paul is trying to do. He's trying to get people to understand that there is a resurrection, and you will be who you are, but different. Different in the sense that you'll be abiding and living in a place, in a space that nobody on earth has done except Jesus. And you're there, and it'll be great, and you'll have the perfection that you should have had if you hadn't sinned, and that you sin is imperfect and we don't know, and because of our sin we can't know. We can only trust. But Jesus has said that those who trust me will do, and I will set you free from some stuff. And here's some things, just a few things that I want to point out as I kind of close out here. When you're resurrected, you're going to be free from some stuff. You're going to be free of the fudging the truth. Now, you can call it anything you want to. Lying's what the Bible calls it, but fudging the truth. You're going to be free from that. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You won't do that. You're going to be free from pride, ego, all the things that goes with that. You're going to be free of not believing the best of others. In other words, you're not going to look at anybody in heaven and not think the best of them. You're not going to think that. It's not going to be in your mind. It's never going to enter. It's not even going to enter in. You're going to be free from caving into fear. Fear of the past, fear of the present, fear of something. Fear of this, fear of that. There's not going to be in heaven. There's no fear in heaven. You're going to be free from one of the greatest things, I think, of all time that continues to remain. Those are all true. This one to me is the world. It speaks to the world. Free from anxiety about the future. You see, these people had anxiety about the future. They wanted to know, was there a resurrection or not? They argued about that. Paul said, yes, there is. Well, okay, then we want to know what we're going to be like. That's anxiety. That's worry. That's concern. That's care. Got so big of a deal, they got a letter, and some people had to go all the way to Ephesus to find Paul to say, Paul, these people are all jacked up down here. We need some help. We need you to straighten this up. I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us, if not all of us, would certainly love to be free from anxiety. And certainly most of our anxiety is about the tomorrow. And most importantly, although least thought of, is free from sin. There'll be no sin in heaven. There'll be no thought of sin. There'll be no knowledge of sin. There'll be no sin. I don't know that I can even say that I completely can get my head around that. We have never seen that. We have never lived in that. Jesus represents a sin-free person, and we're still having trouble wrapping our head around him. But if you think about just our material existence that we've had here on the earth for all of us here, those that are watching here, those that are here, we haven't seen that. That doesn't exist in our eyes. There is nobody sin-free. There is no place that's sin-free. Not up on top of some monastery in some corner of the room, or not anywhere else, not down at the bottom of a cave. There's no sin-free environment here. We are in a sinful environment. We live in chaos. We are surrounded by chaos. And so therefore we don't know what that's like. We can't even fathom it, but I promise you, it's there. That's what happens. That's what it is. There's no sin there. It's been banished. It's got its own place, where all of it gets piled up in one place and there is no non-sin there. Free from anxiety about the future and free from sin. Free from a bunch of other stuff. That's what the resurrected person experiences. In a beautiful, perfect image of God. In a body that doesn't hurt, doesn't ache, doesn't age, doesn't grow weary, doesn't get out of breath, doesn't run out of energy, doesn't worry about what it looks like, doesn't worry about what anybody else looks like, doesn't care what it's going to eat or not eat, doesn't think about that. None of that stuff. How you going to pay the bill? What we going to do next? I mean, we could go on and on. Any two of those would be enough to cause us to think we died and went to heaven, but a whole bunch of them together is just beyond my imagination. That's what it's going to be like. That's what the resurrection is. That's who we are going to be. Paul says that. We're going from perishable to imperishable, from dust to life everlasting. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, this morning, Lord, there may be some who've never experienced the salvation that is only of you through Christ. Maybe some, the Lord, never will see the resurrection apart from believing in you, and they decide this morning that they want to be a part of that. They'd like to be free from all these things. They'd like to know that, and you've promised it, and you have demonstrated it, and your word shows it. I pray for those folks this morning to come to you and say, Lord, I didn't believe all this stuff, but now I do. I didn't know I realize I need that. I want that. And my sinfulness will prevent it, but I confess that to you, Lord, this morning. And I believe that you can and will keep your promise to raise me to new life. That you'll save me now and save me then. And I'll be resurrected and live in heaven, free from all these things. I pray, Lord, this morning there may be Christians who are struggling and they haven't realized just what they have in Christ. And that'll set them free from some of their cares and concerns. And they'll rest easy. That death will no longer be the dreaded experience, the painful thing that we think it is, that we worry about. That we'll be raised to new life, to live forevermore with Christ. I pray, Lord, this morning that you'd have your will and your way in each one of our lives, that we would be your people, those who know Jesus as Lord and Savior, that we could express these truths to the world around us, the dying and decaying, dusty world that we live in. There'd be life after dust. I ask that in Jesus' precious name this morning. Amen.